Today, we're going to talk about and take a closer look at the monarch butterfly in the Georgia Piedmont, its native host plant species, and how you can make a difference in its population dynamics. So before we look specifically at the Piedmont, let's ensure that everybody can identify this iconic butterfly and distinguish between the male and the female. So in this slide, the male is pictured on the top, the female on the bottom. It's tough to get them to pose with exactly the same lighting and the wing spread, but take a look to see if you can find some differences. So the male has a dot on each hind wing, and we can call them daddy dots, just so you can remember the male has the dots. These are actually androconial sacs to hold pheromones. His wing veins appear to be thinner than the female's. Her veins simply are edged with more black scales to give her a more muted appearance. She's holding the eggs, so she wants to look a little more muted than the male. Males across nature are always flashier. Butterflies, including the monarch, go through complete metamorphosis, having 4 life stages: egg, larva, chrysalis, and adult. And for the monarch, this takes about 1 month from egg to adult. After mating, females can potentially lay about 500 eggs, preferably 1 per plant on the youngest leaves. These are laid exclusively on milkweeds, Asclepias species, which we refer to as their host plant. Milkweeds contain a cardiac glycoside toxin, which monarchs sequester in their bodies, making them distasteful to most vertebrate predators. It does not protect them from invertebrates, such as spiders, wasps, or praying mantises. So you can see here the beautiful life cycle of the monarch on this poster. And keep in mind that monarchs will only live 2 to 6 weeks during the spring and the summer when they're breeding. But those adults that emerge from their chrysalids in late summer or fall can live up to 6 to 9 months, because monarchs have an annual cycle that includes migration. So let's take a look at the map first. There are actually 3 different populations of monarchs in North America. Down in South Florida, there's a resident population that doesn't migrate. Why leave? I mean, the weather's usually pretty nice, the flowers are always blooming, but those monarchs will only live 2 to 6 weeks as an adult. There's the western population, west of the Rocky Mountains, that migrates and overwinters on the California coast. And then there's the larger population of monarchs, the eastern population, which of course Georgia is part of, and they migrate and overwinter in the transvolcanic mountain range of Mexico. These populations are not genetically different from one another, and there is some mixing. For instance, a monarch in Arizona might migrate to California, or it might go to Mexico. And some of our eastern monarchs might head down to Florida and become residents. Now take a look at the annual life cycle wheel. We're here in September. We're during the fall migration, But right now, there are monarchs here in Georgia that have been laying eggs, and we have caterpillars. So what's the deal with that? There's usually what we call a pre-migration into Georgia, where there's sort of a last-ditch effort for the monarchs to get a fresh new generation to send down to Mexico. And typically, monarchs begin arriving in Mexico around November the 1st. So I want to introduce you to Journey North. JourneyNorth.org is a website that tracks migrations and seasons. So besides monarchs, this community science project tracks seasonal changes, hummingbirds, American robins, and more. This is all done through the efforts of community scientists like yourself and has been going on since 1994. So they have a wealth of data. You simply need to create a password and log in to record your sightings. And I'm introducing you to Journey North because we're going to take a look at some of the data from the last 5 years here in the Georgia Piedmont. So I looked in the last 5 years, specifically of those sightings that were logged into Journey North from the Georgia Piedmont area. You can see that the number of sightings, they've fluctuated over the last 5 years, but most years they've been decreasing. The last sighting was on December the 12th. Wow, wait a minute. Didn't I say that the monarchs were going to be arriving in Mexico around November the 1st? What are they still doing here December the 12th? That's an interesting topic, and we believe that more and more monarchs are staying in the Southeast, spending the winter here. So these monarchs that are showing up in the fall, their appearance is fresh and vibrant, which means they're new monarchs. They're probably coming in from coast or from the Northeast. They're laying eggs in August and September, and we're observing them flying and nectaring, drinking nectar from flowers. So here is one of the maps from Journey North. There are several categories in which you can report adult monarch sightings, like I've just seen a monarch, or this is the first monarch I've seen all year, or it's peak migration, or I'm seeing a monarch roost. This particular map is 2024 peak migration. Now you'll notice that most of the sightings are coming down the center of the country. That's where the majority of monarchs are traveling to head down to Mexico, because the majority of monarchs are coming from that area around the Great Lakes. They've spent their summer there. Those sightings of peak migration in the center of the country could be hundreds of monarchs are flying through. But here is my sighting. I have 2 monarchs in my yard on October 12th. That's peak migration here in Georgia. If you have more than 1 monarch in your yard during the fall, it's peak. You see, there are not a lot of sightings in this record of peak migration here in Georgia, and I think maybe people are thinking why should I list that under peak migration? That's not a lot of monarchs. It is for us here in Georgia. So monarchs travel during the day and they rest at night. And when they rest, they usually cluster in what's called a roost. So I mentioned roosts as one of the possible fall sighting categories that you can report to Journey North. They could be small, they could be large. Usually in trees that provide shelter from wind and having a nectar source nearby is where monarchs choose to make their roosts. Here's another map from Journey North. And this is a roost map from 2019. And you say, gosh, Susan, that was a long time ago. Actually, this is the only record that I could find of a roost recorded in Georgia. It was dated October the 9th, in Decatur, with 6 monarchs roosting in a water oak adjacent to a field of goldenrod. This is really important information. I'm wondering if people don't realize that there should be more sightings here in Georgia, and people are simply not recording them. So now we're moving deeper into migration and into the overwintering period. Monarchs head down to Mexico, eastern monarchs, and they spend the entire winter there. So the icons, the butterfly icons that are on this little map, show you where colonies of monarchs have been found. These sites are all at about 10,000 feet in that transvolcanic mountain range west of Mexico City, between the states of Michoacan and Mexico. Monarchs will be spending most of their time roosting in the trees or on the trunks of trees, but they will take flight and go down to find water in those mountain meadows there in the transvolcanic mountains. But they leave usually by the end of February or early March to make their journey north. So when do we see them here in the Piedmont of Georgia? The earliest sighting that I could find in the last 5 years was February 28th. And that seems unusually early. And I'm wondering if that monarch may have been spending the winter on the coast and have flown inward. In most cases, people noted that the wings were worn and tattered. Those were the notations from February through early April. There was a lot of egg laying, a lot of flying, and a lot of nectaring happening. So I found it very unusual if a monarch would leave Mexico at the end of February. It's about 1,400 miles from the major sanctuary in Mexico to Atlanta. And if they travel 30 to 50 miles a day, it would take about 4 to 6 weeks to get here. So, questions: where are these monarchs coming from? This is the map from this year, 2025, in the spring, of the first adult sighted. And I've stopped the map in April because I wanted you to see, before the map gets full of dots, when the map is showing its first sightings in the Georgia Piedmont. And this is from a friend of mine in Gainesville who saw her first monarch on April 1st. That's about the time that I normally see them here in Lilburn, where I live. And those monarchs are looking for the tiniest sprig of milkweed that has popped out, and the female wants to lay eggs on that. I'll show you a map later in the season. You can see from the map key that the darker the color, the later in the season it is. So a lot of sightings in the north, not as many sightings here in Georgia, but we do have them late into the season. And isn't it strange how there are almost no sightings in the coastal plain? This was the last sighting I saw. That was July 26th in Athens, their first sighting of a monarch, which makes me think this was definitely not a monarch coming from Mexico. It was coming in on that pre-migration that I mentioned earlier, coming in from the coastal areas to the center of Georgia and beginning to lay eggs for that last ditch effort to get a new generation down to Mexico. So now that you know when the monarchs have been sighted in the Piedmont, let's take a look at their host plant. So which Asclepias species are appropriate to plant in the Georgia Piedmont? Where can you find this information? Which are the milkweeds that should be avoided and why? And where can native milkweeds be purchased? So I was very lucky to be able to work with Linda Chafin and Ellen Honeycutt on the revision of this brochure, Monarchs, Milkweed, and Georgia Gardeners, published in early 2024. The previous brochure recommended native species, but unfortunately, several of them were not commercially available. So these four, we're calling them the Fab Four, are all commercially available, are safe and beneficial to grow throughout the state to help monarch butterflies. Swamp or Asclepias incarnata, butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa, world, Asclepias verticillata, and smooth seed, Asclepias perennis. This brochure you can find on the Georgia Native Plant Society website under their educational resources. And it's a wealth of information. It has an ecoregional map that shows which milkweeds actually are native to each region, plus a complete list of all the native species in the state with their scientific names, their range, and some notations about them. Maybe they are wet tolerant or shade tolerant, or maybe they're rare. So I've placed a butterfly icon on those species specific to the Georgia Piedmont. Now, perennis, Asclepias perennis, is not typically found in the Piedmont area, but because it is commercially available and acceptable species, I've marked it here on the brochure. There are 6 milkweeds that are rare in Georgia, according to Georgia DNR, and these are temporarily off limits. Scientists and conservationists are working to secure these species and restore their habitats on protected lands. There are 3 species that are no-grows here in Georgia. Do not plant these. Common milkweed, which is common to the Midwest and Northeast, it's an aggressive competitor with other native milkweeds and native plants. Balloon plant is from South Africa. And tropical milkweed, Asclepias curassavica, is a native to South and Central America and the Caribbean. This species in particular continues to be readily available at many of the big box stores and nurseries. It's a beautiful plant, easy to grow, but for monarchs, it can be a problem, especially during fall migration. I've put an excerpt from Tropical Milkweed and OE, Potential Risks for Monarchs, which is a handout from the Monarch joint venture. And this lists out some of the major problems. Research is still going on, but because this is a tropical species, it can be flowering, forming seeds, and have beautiful fresh leaves during the fall migration, whereas our native milkweeds are perennials and are dying back while the monarchs are migrating. So it's tempting those monarchs, fooling them that, oh, maybe this is breeding season. I think I'll stop migrating, break my diapause. That the monarchs that are migrating are not breeding, they're in sexual diapause. Their sexual development has been arrested, it's not complete. So if they are tempted by this beautiful milkweed at a time when they should be migrating, they would break diapause and start breeding. So there's a protozoan parasite that we're calling here OE because it's easier to say OE than Ophriocistus electroscira, which is its actual name. It infects the monarchs, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but the research has shown that almost 50% of the winter breeding monarchs here in the Southeast were infected with that parasite. It's also a problem that there could be a food shortage because it's the only milkweed that's available. And if we have a freeze or the monarchs eat all that plant, and they still need to go through to pupation, there's a food limitation. So they could starve to death or they could resort to cannibalism. So as native plant people, you know, only plant milkweed native to your region. If you have this tropical milkweed on your property, cut it back in the fall and keep cutting it back through February as the leaves resprout, because otherwise it could be keeping the monarchs here in the Southeast when they should be in Mexico. So what can you do to help the monarchs? Number one, create habitat using native milkweeds and nectar plants. For every milkweed that you plant, you should have 8 to 10 nectar sources. Milkweed is for monarch caterpillars. The butterflies will drink nectar from milkweed flowers, but they're generalist. They will drink nectar from a variety of different flowers. Make multiple nectar resources available in every season when monarchs and other pollinators are present. And of course, eliminate the use of pesticides and herbicides when possible, and remove invasive non-native plants. So we're recommending that you have a minimum of at least 2 native milkweed species in your garden, your habitat, and at least 3 of each of those species. And research has found that planting milkweeds at the edge of your habitat rather than in the center is more attractive to egg-laying females. So you can see here that their placement of butterfly weed and swamp milkweed are on the edges of the habitat. So I'm sure you can't read this small print, but this is a wonderful brochure that Georgia Native Plant Society has on their education section. And I've just copied and pasted the Forbes section because I wanted you to see the list of native plants in the Piedmont from Georgia Native Plant Society. And I'm placing it next to a list from the Xerces Society for their Region 11 that includes Georgia for the nectar plants in the Southeast used by monarchs. I've tried to match up using that same butterfly icon all of the native plants that are on the list from Georgia Native Plant Society for the Piedmont and the Xerces Society of the different nectar plants that are used by monarchs. It's almost every one. Now, some of these are shrubs and small trees on the Xerces lists, but those are listed in a different section of landscaping in the Piedmont for Georgia Native Plant Society. So by using your list, you can do a lot of nectar planting for monarchs. So what else can you do to help monarchs? Contribute to community science. We've already talked about Journey North. It's so easy to create a password, log on, and ideally have a picture to document your sightings of monarchs. Whether it's incidental anytime during the year, a roost, a peak migration, your first monarch, contribute to Journey North. If you're on iNaturalist, which is another great community science project, there are 2 specific projects related to monarchs. By simply uploading your photos to iNaturalist, they will automatically be aggregated to these projects, or you can join these projects directly. It just involves taking a picture, right? So this is the iNaturalist homepage for monarch observations November through March. This was created by Georgia DNR because we are very concerned about monarchs spending the winter months here in Georgia. And we've been collecting data and soliciting observations for about 5 years now. Please, please contribute to this. Take a look at this map. Look at all the sightings in the winter in the Georgia Piedmont. A lot on the coast, some sprinkled across South Georgia, but there's a lot of overwintering monarchs that seem to be in the Georgia Piedmont. Here's another contribution you can make. That Xerces Society brochure that I showed you a picture of. This is the front cover. It's available online, but they are looking for help to find more plants that the monarchs are using through their nectar plant observation form. You can get this link by taking a photo of this page, writing it down, or going to this particular Monarch Nectar Plants of the Southeast document on the Xerces Society website. And they want some information, the plant species, ecosystem type, the time frame, but most importantly, photo documentation of the monarch either on the plant nectaring or separate photos of the monarch and the plant on which it was nectaring. If you want to delve deeper into monarchs, I mentioned earlier to Lily that tagging monarchs is a possibility. Project Monarch Health, which is a project out of the University of Georgia, tests for those protozoan parasites. Or you can get involved in the National Phenology Network's Nectar Connectors campaign. I'll talk about each of these just a little bit deeper in the next slides. If you want to tag monarchs, you would buy your tags from Monarch Watch, which is based out of the University of Kansas. 25 tags are $15. These are mailed to you, and these charts that are on the Monarch Watch website indicate by latitude when you should start tagging your monarchs. So I'm at about latitude 33. I could start tagging right now. I usually wait till later in September because I'm looking for my peak migration dates, September 29th through October 11th, with my midpoint at October the 7th. If you'd like to test for those protozoan parasites, this is a fascinating coexistence that this parasite has with the monarch. An infected monarch will have the spores of this parasite on the outside of its abdomen. When the female lays an egg, those spores are dropped onto the egg and the leaf material around it. When the caterpillar hatches, it eats the egg shell and starts consuming the leaf as well as the spores. Those spores break open on the inside of its body and start reproducing. If it's a highly infected monarch, it may die as a caterpillar or as a chrysalis. But if the infection is not too high, this clever little parasite will form spores and move to the outside of the body. And when the butterfly emerges, those spores will make this butterfly a carrier. This is a picture of what those spores look like under a microscope, and what these large things here are the scales of the butterfly. To test, you simply use a tape to take a sample off of the abdomen of the butterfly, put it on a white index card, and you mail it in to Dr. Altizer's lab at UGA. You can get a test kit by sending an email to monarchhealth@gmail.com. This is a map from Dr. Altizer's website showing the positive OE monarchs per location across the US. The red is 100% infected. So you can see that definitely there's a problem down here in Florida. But I'm going to click to the next slide and show you a close-up of the Georgia Piedmont area. And in most cases, we're clear or have a very low infection rate. But it would be great to get more information to this lab so that they continue their research. And here's just a graph showing the monarch samples, where they're from, and the OE positive. So look, there's only 8,000 samples from the Gulf Coast, but they're 71% infected. Wow. It's an issue. This is the last project that I'm going to talk about. Very simple to participate in. The Nectar Connectors Project from USA National Phenology Network. I've pulled out the species that they are interested in monitoring here in the Georgia Piedmont, listed them here. And what they want to know is, when are these flowers open and available as nectar sources for monarchs and other pollinators? So you can select one or more. You simply create an account, observe the flowering phenophase, and record your observations. Really easy to participate, but take a look at this participation. One Monarda and one Asclepius was recorded in 2024 from Georgia. We can do better than this. So what more can you do? Support conservation organizations financially and/or by volunteering. Local organizations like Monarchs Across Georgia, the Georgia Native Plant Society, Bird Georgia, they all need your support. Research funding has been drastically cut this year across the board. So if there's a way that you can support Journey North, Project Monarch Health at UGA, the Monarch Butterfly Fund, or Monarch Watch, just to name a few. And lastly, spread the word. Tell your family and neighbors, friends, and coworkers about what you've learned and how they can help. Maybe you could certify your habitat through the State Botanical Gardens Connect to Protect program, Monarch Watch, or Monarchs Across Georgia. Signage can be a conversation starter. That's the end of my presentation. Here's my email contact, and I welcome any questions that you have.
Great. So the first one is from Joan Goppin. My neighbor has several non-native butterfly bush, which is always covered with butterflies. Recently, I've seen swallowtails and viceroys. Do these plants provide appropriate nectar for the monarchs?
So you're talking about Buddleia, butterfly bush. It is a good nectar plant. I'm just not sure Georgia Native Plant Society recommends planting it. I think there might be some better native choices, and I believe that it's actually got some issues with becoming invasive. So don't take it out if it's doing its job, but just keep your eye on it. It is an appropriate nectar source.
We have a couple other questions. Can monarchs, this is Michael Cowan, can monarchs survive a night of freezing temps?
Oh, a night being under 32 degrees all night? I would say no. You know, when I'm down in Mexico, it does get down to 29 degrees, but the monarchs are actually in a canopied forest. So there's a microclimate there. The trunks of the trees are actually warmer than the branches. So many of the monarchs will cluster on the trunk of the tree. So even though it's really cold outside, they're not getting exposed to those freezing temperatures. The biggest problem down in Mexico is monarchs getting wet and then the temperature dropping below freezing. Because once they're wet, they have trouble holding on to their temperature longer. That was probably more information than you needed.
Well, it's cool to think about how they're overwintering and all that. The third question is, so can anyone tag monarchs or do you have to be with an approved organization? From Elizabeth Dupree.
Anybody can tag monarchs. I've done it with kindergarten students. So it's easy to do, and there are directions online on Monarch Watch. You don't really need any training in advance because it's really easy to do. Capturing the monarch might be the hardest part.
I was wondering, you have all these beautiful photographs, and every time I get close to a monarch, it flies away right away. And I was wondering how you get those photos.
um, in Mexico, it's a little easier because they're all clustered. They're trying not to move because they don't want to expend their energy. They have to subsist all winter off of the fat stores that they've gathered on their journey down there by drinking nectar. So it's really important that your garden have lots of nectar sources at the end of September and October to fuel the migration.
We do have a related question about how do you tag a butterfly or how do you catch them?
So a long butterfly net, not these little short ones that are made for kids, a long one, and you sweep it and then twist the handle so that it closes the net. You can hold the butterfly through the net, making sure that its wings are all together so it's not struggling and going to break a wing. Then you can reach in and take the butterfly out. You hold all four wings together, and then the tags come on a little sticker sheet. I usually try to get the tag off of the sticker sheet with a toothpick because I don't want the oil from my fingers to get on the sticky stuff on the back of the tag. So I peel it off with the toothpick and roll it onto the hind wing and record the information that's on the tag before you release it. It's really easy.
We had a couple questions about that same one. And then my healthy stand of milkweed from summer 2024 was almost completely gone this summer. I did have 2 monarchs in 2024. What are your thoughts on that?
You had 2 monarchs in the fall or the spring, probably the fall, more likely. I tell you, it depends on what's happening around you. I was talking with Lily earlier. I have 50 plants of milkweed in my yard. I live on a 1/3 acre. I have no monarchs right now, but I have friends who live 5 blocks away who have monarchs. Mystery, right? But I do live in a neighborhood that is a very strict HOA. A lot of neighbors who use mosquito services, lawn services, where they're spraying various chemicals. So I wonder if what your neighbors are doing around you might be affecting who's coming to your property. I think it's affecting what's happening on my property for sure. And it's amazing to me how a monarch can actually find the milkweed, right? You're flying, you're looking for milkweed. You want to have those flowers to draw them in. And I think they just find the milkweed by landing on the plant and testing it with their chemoreceptors in their feet. But to find a one plant is just incredible.
Let's see, we have a lot of questions, so I'm just kind of scanning.
Yeah.
Can you speak about, and I've read a lot about this too online recently, about the captive rearing and the effects that might have on the general population when they're taking them into their butterfly habitats and rearing them that way?
Right. So it has been a very controversial subject. Some people believe that by bringing them in and rearing by the hundreds, they're going to save the monarch. This is not a way to save the monarch. It's fine to bring in an egg, a caterpillar, to use for educational purposes, to have the joy of raising that monarch and seeing its life stages. But to raise too many indoors, especially, is not good. And in the fall, if you want to raise a few monarchs, don't bring them inside your house, because in order for them to get all those environmental cues, shortening of daylight, cooler temperatures, for them to be able to migrate properly, they have to have those environmental cues. And if you have them in an air-conditioned house, sitting on your kitchen counter, where you flip the light on in the morning and turn it off, at another hour, they're not getting those cues. So they're not going to migrate properly. So if you want to raise a few, do it on an outside porch where they're exposed to the environment.
Some people want to know, can we report the caterpillars too? Because I know we talked about reporting the plants and the butterflies.
Yes. So you can report eggs and caterpillars as well to Journey North. Absolutely.
And I tried to I linked as much as I could keep up with, as far as like the GMPS resources and Journey North, but there were some links that people wanted to get. I think there was a link of the nectar plants and some others about where they can like submit things. So is there like a go-to site list or maybe we can create one, I can go back through?
So I can definitely go through the PowerPoint and capture all these links, and then maybe you could send that out to all the participants. Would that be helpful?
That'd be perfect, because I'm going to send everyone, and there was a question about the YouTube. I will send everyone a link to the YouTube once we get that ready to go, and then a link list to everyone registered, if that works.
Sure. Happy to do that.
Yeah, because I mean, it was a lot of people were commenting about the wealth of information and they wanted to share it. So I think that would good. And And someone did post, I don't know if you could see these photos on the comments in the chat. There's a picture of a chrysalis, wondering if it was still viable. If you scroll down to the bottom, 30, if there was a before and after photo, I guess.
I only see 5 questions.
Oh, that's probably the Q&A. So if you go to the chat box,
Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then it should be at the almost to the bottom. Yeah, some of the questions are in the chat.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I've got a ton.
Okay, I see a chrysalis. I'm going to click on the second one and download that so I can get a better picture. I would say that's not viable. My best guess is that's infected with the OE parasite. They usually get brown dots and deform. So I'd say that's not a viable chrysalis.
Do you have time for a few more questions?
Yeah.
Why is it important to have a variety of nectar sources in addition to milkweed? So 8 additional species for each planted milkweed.
Oh, so the recommendation is to have at least 8 plants besides your milkweed. It doesn't have to be 8 different species. So it's just to be sure that you're providing enough food for the adult butterfly. So, because they are generalists, right? And they're drinking from lots of different flowers. So have 8 nectar sources. They don't have to be different species, but it's good to have some variety there, you know, always little different colors. Monarchs like more of that platform so they can land, right? Like a purple coneflower or that puffiness of a joe pye weed. They need that landing platform. So those would be the types of flowers that you would want to have for butterflies. Just a variety. And, you know, more than one milkweed for the host plant. Have a variety of nectar sources. Does that make sense?
Be clustered around the milkweed.
Yes.
Okay. Someone wanted to mention they photographed 15 to 20 fresh monarchs yesterday and live east of Hayesville, so that's cool.
That is very cool. I'm jealous.
And someone has 34 chrysalises and hopes to release them soon in Milton and want to know if they need to report to iNaturalist and Journey North. They already use iNaturalist.
You don't say, I know that Fish and Wildlife will combine that information. But if you have time, it would be great to report to both. But if you're already using iNaturalist, and that's great.
I have noticed, I haven't done it lately, when I upload pictures of things I don't know the species of, someone will come in and ID it for me too.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
That's
That's
that.
the wonderful thing
Yeah.
about iNat.
Let's see. Oh, are you leading tours to Mexico to see the monarch sanctuaries?
Yes.
Oh,
But I'm full for 2026. Sorry. We
no.
filled in 2 weeks, but we take small groups.
Oh, how do
We
you
only
get
take
to be
10.
in the know of that? Do you have to get on a mailing list or?
You have to email me and say, hey,
Oh,
Susan, put me on the list for 2027.
oh, wow. All right. And is wingstem a nectar source?
Yes. That's
Different flower.
Verbicina, right?
What's that?
Verbicina, right? Wingstem.
Wish I was more knowledgeable on that. I'm sure someone will comment in here. I have different flowers at different times. What are the important times to have flowers blooming?
So I mean, I try to have something blooming spring, summer, and fall, covering all the seasons when pollinators are active. Um, you want to be early spring if you're going to help the native bees that are coming out early. If you're only thinking monarchs, it's not just about monarchs, right? It's about all the pollinators. So spring, summer, and fall, but especially in fall, because pollinators, including the monarch, are preparing for winter, right? So they're storing up their pollen, their nectar. So it's important to have those fall resources.
I think this is the last question. We had a hatch of yellow tiger swallowtails 3 weeks ago. Some stayed on the Joe Pye weed for at least 5 days. Is the Joe Pye weed one of the plants on your list, but under its official name?
Yes, it is. It's all right. They've changed the name, and I will not be able to remember it because the pressure is on.
Yeah, they changed it. Like, is it Eutrochium
Yeah,
purpureum? Is
yeah,
that still the name, or is it a different
yeah.
name?
It's you,
Okay.
you,
I don't know how to pronounce
Eutropium. Yeah.
that. Okay. Okay, so I think that's all the questions, and I'll send out that email to everyone. And so appreciate your presentation. That was such
Of
great information. And we got
And
our,
I'll work on that list and I'll send it to you tomorrow, Lily, so you can send that out to everybody.
it sounds great. Thanks so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. And I'll
All
send
right.
you a copy of
Oh, is
the.
that Susan Hendricks? Hey.
All righty.
All right.
Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
so much.